Thank you. Um, so, you already know who I am, so let's talk about Bernstein and the Bernstein Collection. The Bernstein Collection started coming to the library in 1953 by Bernstein himself. Every year we would get a letter from him accompanying a manuscript or two that he'd written that year, basically for the tax write-off. And then we got a lot of things that way. Then in 1969, he stopped. And the reason he stopped was because Congress changed the law and he could no longer take a tax write-off. So, which happened with a lot of other collections too. But when he died in 1990, his family started saying, well, what are we going to do with the rest of the collection, everything else that Lenny had written since then? And they started going to various institutions around the country. I know they went to Harvard, I think they went to Yale, I think they went to even the New York Phil Archives, and ultimately decided on the library. I don't know that we quite appreciated what that meant at the time. It turned out to be what we've now calculated to be about 400,000 items. And actually, as of last night, it's 400,001 because Jamie Bernstein gave us a letter that we hadn't had before that we didn't even know existed. And it's basically close to every piece of paper Lenny touched. It's not only his music manuscripts, it's his personal correspondence, his business correspondence, his fan mail, 120 scrapbooks, his date books. There's about 17,000 photographs. There's the suit in which he conducted his New York premiere. There are, I think, 900 recordings. And one of the, we wanted to give you a sense today of some of the oddities. So that was why my two tables, I sort of pulled things like the license plate and things like that. It's certainly one of the richest collections we have, one of the most heavily used. And in this, the centennial year, it is unquestionably the most heavily used. It's been sort of thrilling and overwhelming. Oh, I forgot. I have some pictures to give you a sense of what the collection looks like. This represents about a third of the collection. So these, but that's how they're stored, and we do a wonderful job, and everything is clearly labeled, and there's a incredibly detailed finding aid online. So the collection actually came around 1993. That's how long it took after he died for it to start coming. It came over a series of several years in fits and starts. And I was here, I started in the library in 91, and I was at the ceremony, which was, Lauren Bacall was sort of the guest of honor for the presentation, and the kids were here. But I was not involved at all. There were 3 colleagues before me who were originally going to be the archivists, curators for the collection, and they all threw up their hands. So somehow, I don't know how it happened, it ended up in my lap, and it's taken over a big percentage of my life ever since then. I guess one of the oddities that people probably don't realize, there's nothing quite like this job in that I now know Lenny more intimately than any other person in my life. I know him better than I know my own father, and I'm not trying to claim any relationship, but you know, I've watched him from his baby pictures through his family, and not only that, I knew the kids before I met them. I saw, you know, their mother photographs when she was pregnant. I saw the letters they wrote home from camp, and I can't tell you what an odd experience it is to actually meet someone, but you've seen them grow up and you know things about their childhoods or what were going on behind the scenes that they didn't. What I mostly want to do today is give you a sense of the adventure of this and the surprises and the unexpected things, kind of the behind the scenes feeling I get. And so I picked some specific items that I thought you'd get a kick out of and that I found surprising or moving. And the first one, as I mentioned, we have Lenny's date books. And this is the one from 1978. And what I hope you'll do is sort of get the sense from my eyes of what it's like when you open a box or a folder and take something out, not knowing what's really there, and then you start going through it and discovering what's there. This is the year that Lenny's wife, Felicia, died. And, we don't read everything in the collections. We're not supposed to, but things catch your eye. And you'll see on the right side there, you can't even read the date, Thursday, I think it's April 6th, it just says chemo. And Felicia had breast cancer. And so you start getting the sense, you start seeing all the doctor's appointments and things like that. And then you see I know it's hard to read, but on the left there, it says Carter Hospital, hat, bag, wheelchair. And what we don't know, was he taking them to her already in the hospital? Was he taking them to pick her up? But you just sort of get the practical things of what it means. But then the thing that I got goose chills on was when I got to the day she died, and I've never seen anything like this in Bernstein, and you can hardly see it there. There's just this faint, squiggly blue line diagonally across the page. And I still get chills when I see that. It's just, it doesn't say anything, there's no words, but you just feel the emotion behind that. I mean, he couldn't even do a strong line. It was just like giving up or something. And it was one of the more moving moments with the collection. I mentioned that we keep getting things to the collection, and there was a late batch of material that we hadn't gotten to processing because it wasn't sort of one of the major series and it had come later. And I started going through these batches of things. And for those of you who don't know, Lenny was a horrific smoker. It's hard to find a photograph of him without a cigarette, and I've told he smoked up to 3 packs a day at some points. And it became a big issue among the family. His wife tried to get him to quit. His kids tried to get him to quit. I think he had health issues from it. So finally, there was something called Smoke Enders, which was a program to hopefully like AA or something for quitting smoking. I don't know this for a fact, but I was told because of his celebrity, they created a group just for he and Lauren Bacall. But it turns out part of the Smoke Enders thing is you're supposed to keep a logbook, and they have assignments and things like that. And you think, it wouldn't even occur to you. And yet I started going through it, and it's one of the most startling things I've ever seen in the collection. I'm going the wrong way. I'm still going the wrong way. Okay, there's Felicia and Lenny. So there's the logbook. But what you'll start seeing, and I've just written down some things to read out. He writes, one of the reasons he's doing this is Felicia's disease, major force, yet promotes anxiety leading to more smoking. And then there's a section called Major Lists, Assets and Dreams, Reasons for Quitting. And this is, it's not often that you have somebody writing something so specifically about themselves, for themselves. And under assets, he lists all one could wish for: beautiful family, but somehow disintegrating; fame, fortune, adulation; gifts from heaven; music, intelligence; they say charisma, etc., power to convey ideas and love for music, plus words, plus theater. And then under dreams, aspirations, he wrote, 1, to recover joie de vivre. 2, to sense purpose in life. 3, to write music, especially opera, to create a truly American opera or many, and to live long enough and to be well enough to do so. 4, to phase out conducting and become truly a creator of words as well as notes. 5, to see my wife happy and peaceful. 6, to see my children happy and functioning. And 7, restore some sort of sex life. I thought I would get a laugh on that. I guess this is too serious. Now, the next thing is something I may get in trouble for. Boy, I'm just the worst person at this. One of the things that came in the collection was Lenny's crossword puzzle books. There were either 2 or 3 cartons of them. And, there's no other collection I know that came with somebody's crossword puzzle books. And one of my jobs, unexpectedly, was to go through each one of those scrapbooks, crossword puzzle books, and decide which ones for us to keep and which ones to not. And the reasoning behind them, what to keep, was if, other than filling out the crossword puzzles themselves, if he actually wrote things in the crossword puzzle books that had any research value. And if there were notes about schedules or ideas for an upcoming concert, or, there was occasional marginalia. And I actually ended up keeping, as I recall, about 30 of these crossword puzzle books. And I have one here, and it's the one pictured there. And on the inside flyleaf there, he wrote a poem. Lenny wrote many poems. He was not a very good poet, although I think he thought he was. But this is one that struck me, and again, you're hearing it here first, and you will never hear it again, and I may be taken off the stage, but here it goes. And remember, well, I'll just read it. München, 9:30 a.m., 23 June 86. After nearly a year of daily diarrhea, Lomotil, Imodium, and every brand of sodium, ensued a week's duration of solid constipation. So via Lomotil, etc., and now today, Donnerwetter, I'm finally shitting very much better. Laus Deo. P.S. 9:45, forget it, diarrhea's back. So you can imagine, that was one of those unexpected things. And I hate to say, I sort of have a sense where he was when he was doing this. So when I said I felt very close to Lenny, I feel really close to Lenny. I'm within the batch that this came with. I just want to mention something. There was this diary with Lenny's sort of with dark brown leather and his name on it. And I've never seen another diary of Lenny's, and it turned out to be 1989 and 90, the year he died. And it's very hard to read a lot of it. I've been trying to transcribe it, and I'm not going to say much about it here other than to say its primary focus seems to be struggling with faith and religion. And I just found that fascinating. And it's something that, the thrilling thing for me is now I know it's there, nobody else does, and I can't wait to see who comes to look at it and discover it and do something with it. So that's, always our hope with these things is when is somebody gonna, take off with some of the things that are in the collection. So tell your friends or scholars or researchers that there's this amazing unknown diary. I figured people would want to know a little bit about dealing with the music. And that's been another sort of exciting, unexpected things. You've heard a lot of stuff so far, but I want to tell you just, I think, three favorite things. It turns out that Lenny wrote a ballet in 1941 when he was staying in Key West called Conch Town, which apparently is the phrase the natives used to call each other. And, you know, nothing ever happened with it. It was never performed, never produced. It was just one of those unknown works. And I'm not the world's greatest sight reader, but I was flipping through it, and I'll never forget, I got to page 15, and I'll never get this right. And I don't know how many of you can read music, but this leapt out at me. So remember, this is 1941, and what that is da 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 da. So the entire melody for America from West Side Story was written 12 years earlier. And what's even sort of more interesting is he starts developing it as a major theme, and you know the opening section, Puerto Rico, you lovely island. That becomes a theme, and then they go in counterpoint, and then the rhythm starts shifting. And so this fully developed, it's not exactly a symphonic thing, but this rich working of it happens in this ballet that nobody knew of, nothing ever happened with. So that was a pretty thrilling moment. And something similar, which you already knew about, and I didn't want to, I purposely didn't scan it because I didn't want to take James's thunder away, but I was the one who discovered A Valentine for Jamie and Alexander. I don't know how many of you here were the, you know, thank you. There was, you know, this little, the collection is full of these little piano pieces or songs he wrote for friends or family, for birthdays or anniversaries and things like that. And, you know, it looks like this slight song and you can hardly tell anything from it. But I remember something about it when I looked at it said, oh my God, is that what I think it is? And I remember taking it to one of the pianos and playing it and saying, oh my God, that became Make Our Garden Grow in Candide. And that was a thrilling experience. Now moving on to West Side Story, which you just heard about, as you now know, initially Lenny was going to write the lyrics himself. Actually, originally Comden and Green, but then they couldn't get out of a Hollywood gig, and then Lenny, who thought enormously highly of his own lyric talents, deservedly or not, decided he would do it, and he began doing it, but then realized for various reasons that it was too much, and especially because there was so much dance music and things were getting rewritten, and he couldn't be two places at once. So they brought in a collaborator to co-write the lyrics with him, who ended up being Stephen Sondheim. And in some cases, they adapted lyrics that Lenny had started. You heard some of the original One Hand, One Heart. Here's Lenny's lyrics for what became the Maria we know, which started, Maria, it's honey on my tongue, the taste of it is young and warm. Maria, I'll say it and say it, Maria, it lifts me like a song, the sound of it is strong and warm. You know, nothing. So knowing that, I got to Lenny's manuscript for I Feel Pretty, and there was a whole section in there with a lyric that I'd never seen before, and so I'm going to sing it for you really, really badly, but it goes, put on your mantilla, Maria, and put silver combs in your hair, a touch of perfume from Sevilla, there won't be a prettier girl anywhere. You stroll down the street, the toast of Madrid, and most of Madrid falls down at your feet. The cheers are for you, the plaza is full. When they kill the bull, the ears are for you. And I thought, that has got to be Bernstein. No question about it. Well, Sondheim came to visit, and I was doing sort of a show and tell for him, and I brought this out, and, you know, sort of knowingly, and I said, these are Lenny's lyrics, right? and he went like this. And he said, I have to confess, those lyrics are mine, but in my defense, they were written because Jerome Robbins had an idea that he wanted to stage the number as a mock bullfight, and he asked for lyrics to go with that. So, I mean, but the point there is it's one of the other great things about this job is, finding out things like that and finding them out from the sources. So now you know. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, this. He's an idiot. What? Okay. All right. Getting back to the date books, and this relates to finding out things from the sources and all of that. And this has to do with one of the issues with researchers. And they come and you try and help them and you guide them. And there's this general sense that if somebody finds something in a collection that, that's the Holy Grail. This is the truth. This is the documentation. Well, what I've learned is that's not always true. And one of Lenny's last assistants, musical assistants, was a fellow by the name of Charlie Harmon, who just actually wrote a memoir of his time with Lenny. And actually, because he was working on that memoir, he came here to go through Lenny's date books to confirm things. And while he was here, he told me a story. He would take Lenny's date books and write in advance all the upcoming concerts. So Lenny could know next week in Vienna on this date, this is the program I'm going to be conducting, so he could sort of prepare himself and, read ahead. And then sometimes after the concerts, Lenny would write in the encores he'd performed. Well, apparently, sometimes to entertain Charlie, he would write in fake encores that nobody would ever perform as an encore. And I don't know if you can see it here, but in this one, he wrote Encore Cage Interiors. So I know someday there's going to be some researcher coming and they're going to be amazed and write a dissertation about these encores that nobody would think Lenny would conduct. And yet there it is in black and white. And actually, another one, we have an outline for an early version of West Side Story, and it's titled Gang Bang. And I was lucky enough to have dinner once with Sondheim and Lawrence. And I photocopied all these things from the collection, a lot of which you've seen here and some you haven't, to give to Lawrence because I thought he'd get a kick out of it and it would give me something to say or whatever. And he was flipping through them and found them, and he got to that and he looked at it and pointed, he said, that was a joke, But again, somebody is going to say, at one point they were planning to title West Side Story Gang Bang. So they weren't. So, something else Charlie told me in one of these visits that, you never, there are things collections will never tell you. And I don't even think this is in Charlie's book. But as you know, Lenny was a night owl. He had terrible insomnia, and he was such a sort of head-up people person. He would keep procrastinating actually getting to work. So he often wouldn't start, the real work till 1 or 2 in the morning. And he had a sort of a studio apartment in the same building where his home apartment was, and that's where he would write. However, Lenny could not boil water. He could not cook. He could not do anything like that. So they stocked the cabinets with baby food. So when Lenny got hungry in the middle of the night, he could go to and he'd open, and you can just picture him composing A Quiet Place, eating Gerbers or something. So again, okay. And again, talking about the music manuscripts, you never know what you find. And in this case, it was something that had nothing to do with music. And what you see here, again, I know it's hard to read. We had a folder, and it came in an envelope marked Sonata Ideas and Opera Tunes, and it came from Fairfield, which was his house in Connecticut where he would summer and things like that, and he had a studio there. And there are all these sheafs of paper with sketches and notes and musical ideas. And this, at the top, I don't know if you can see it, it says oidle doidle, and I have no idea what that means. He never, to the best of my knowledge, composed a work like that. But then again, at the bottom, similar to the crossword puzzle book, he scribbled a poem or bits of a poem, and it reveals something about Lenny's thoughts that I haven't really seen quite so concretely before, and it's his struggle with his Judaism and what it means to be Jewish. And interestingly related to that, most of it is made up of questions, which I think is very Jewish. The poem is titled, "There Is Something, What?" And here's what it says. Enough, Hanukkah candles, Seder, high holy day seats, 2, 3, 4 generations. What makes it want to continue? What is it? Is the Talmud even relevant? Why is it worth a Holocaust? If indeed it is anything worth a Holocaust? No. Trying to assimilate, to be balanced at rest, stable in a goy society without relying too much on Judaistic principles. What are they? Abraham, Moses, ghetto traditional? Is Grossinger's enough? UJA? That's it. But you get, it's all questions, and it's just this little perspective window into something about Lenny and the way he thought, and it's on this music sketch. So another exciting thing. The last thing I'm going to talk about is Lenny's sexuality, because it's something people are interested in, curious about. But as it relates to the collection, it says something more broadly, which is I got a phone call in, I think it was 2011, from the estate saying they had about 2,000 letters that they had not given us with the original collection. They were described to me as having been sealed in a bank vault because they were too incendiary. And they had decided it was now more than 20 years since Lenny had died, and that it was time to let them go. And it turned out that somewhere between about a quarter of them were letters from 40 male lovers of Lenny's. And these were all, basically all from the 40s, from before he got married, a couple from 39, and then a couple from after she died much later, but most of them were during the 40s. And they're among the most extraordinary things I've ever read. What's fascinating about them, or one of the things, is they're actually far more revealing of the time than they are of Lenny. You know, it's you get so much perspective on what that world was like at the time, and how people dealt with things, how things were couched or not couched, and often what was surprising was how upfront they were and how honest. And I have just a couple of excerpts to read from them that I found interesting for a couple of reasons. One of his longer relationships was with a guy named Seymour Meyerson. We have 43 letters from him dated between 1945 and 49. And this one is from January 13th, 1946. Oh, I did it right for the first time. Yeah. And what I want you to remember, that Meyerson went into the Army because of the war, during the war, but he wasn't out yet. When the war ended, not all the soldiers were released. It was sort of over time. So he was still in, and remember that this predates Don't Ask, Don't Tell by 47 years. In addition to your letters, 3 other wondrous events occurred which made you touchably close this week. The arrival of your picture, one that I have seen many times during some of our loveliest moments. It provided, by the way, the idea for a cartoon which you might find amusing. The scene is a barracks and the CO is inspecting. All the men have photos of their wives, sweetheart, and mistresses on the shelves, but one soldier, the one about which they know so little, has a picture of a young man, and as the officer passes by, the soldier just smiles and stands fast. Can you provide a caption? I get chills when I read that one. And the other one is from the same person, but it really is more of a love letter. I'm just going to read a brief part of it, but it's addressed to Tremendous Boychik. It's actually the one on the left. And in it really is just sort of a love letter, and it says, "Together, you and I, we have created a world of our own. You are as necessary as the sun. Shine for me, Lenny. Blaze and dismiss the loneliness and darkness around us." And then this is from a pianist named Jean Blythe Middleton, and this comes earlier than that letter, and this seems to have been the first long relationship. It wasn't as long as the other, but this was circa 1941-42. And they're among the most passionate love letters I've seen. And so I wanted to read part of this one to you. "My lover, as weeks go by and our love moves with them, it grows difficult to tell you how much I love you. The wild, passionate words of 6 weeks ago would startle you now. In this letter, I want to restate that first joy in such a way that it will seem more precious with the second hearing. The magic has never gone out of this love. The exquisite sense of you, your body, your warmth, your real and great beauty. That always is with me like a sweet pain. Your voice on the telephone puts out fingers that press things inside me. The burning excitement of the unknown is the burning excitement of the now known. Mystery gone? God, no. What could be more mysterious than this great fund of love and pain and joy, which comes from nowhere, lives on air, and is infinite? This love born to us has being, oh, the wonderful, tragic glory of existence. It is a force never to be forgotten or dispelled, an immortal gift of the gods crowned with mortality of a sort, a human sort. I believe in it, in us, I love you." They just don't write love letters like that anymore, and there's a lot of them. No, this is to Leonard. That's the thing. All these letters are to Leonard. So, and I have never found a letter from Lenny to any of these people. They talk about getting letters from him, but to the best, I don't know if they burned them all or they got lost or whatever. And what's also interesting is some of them tell Lenny to burn the letters they're sending him, and he never does. There are a batch of these letters from Copeland, not as lovers, but talking fairly honestly about things. And Copeland is writing about seeing sailors going by and various doings, and he says, throw this away as soon as you finish reading it, and Lenny kept them all. So he was not to be trusted. But the last letter I'm going to read to you is the one that I found most fascinating and surprising and I guess moving in some ways. And it's a letter from his wife, Felicia, shortly after they married. And it wasn't until I read this, I'd never known what she knew and what their relationship really was like. And this sort of answered it for me. "Darling, if I seemed sad as you drove away today, it was not because I felt in any way deserted, but because I was left alone to face myself and the whole bloody mess which is our connubial life. I've done a lot of thinking and have decided that it's not such a mess after all. First, First, we are not committed to a life sentence. Nothing is really irrevocable, not even marriage, though I used to think so. Second, you are a homosexual and may never change. You don't admit to the possibility of a double life, but if your peace of mind, your health, your whole nervous system depend on a certain sexual pattern, what can you do? Third, I am willing to accept you as you are, without being a martyr or sacrificing myself on the LB altar. I happen to love you very much. This may be a disease, and if it is, what better cure? It may be difficult, but no more so than the status quo which exists now. At the moment, you are not yourself, and this produces painful barriers and tensions for both of us. Let's try and see what happens if you are free to do as you like, but without guilt and confession, please. As for me, once you are rid of tensions, I'm sure my own will disappear. A companionship will grow which probably no one else may be able to offer you. The feelings you have for me will be clearer and easier to express. Our marriage is not based on passion, but on tenderness and mutual respect. Why not have them? And there you have it, a peek at this very complicated man and a very rich life. And I focused on 12 items out of 400,000. And if I did my math right, that's 0.03%. So questions, and that's it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, great. A couple of items, you may know this first one, but it tends to support your story about Lauren Bacall, Bernstein, and Smoke Enders. On August 25th, 1978, Bernstein's 60th birthday, the National Symphony did a tribute concert at Wolf Trap under Rostropovich, which was broadcast nationally. Sweltering summer. I remember I watched it on WGBH in Boston, where it was sweltering also. Lauren Bacall was one of the guest hosts or speakers. And in her remarks, she says, you and I have just decided to stop smoking. So,
cool.
Yeah. And it's now uploaded to YouTube, so you can find that concert and hear the remarks.
Everything is loaded on YouTube.
You mentioned Conktown. I think I saw that supposedly it's being done at the BBC Proms this summer.
There was, actually, if you remember, Kate talked about Nigel Simeone's book.
Right.
And he got permission to transcribe Conktown, and they turned there's a short score, which means it gives suggestions to orchestrations, but it's not fully orchestrated. And he got permission to do a 2-piano transcription, which he had his students perform and record. And I didn't know what the estate had approved beyond that, but I knew that had been done. So I'm curious to know that if somebody may actually do a ballet to it.
I saw it on the schedule, so it's online. It's sometime in August, I believe, and the only other thing I saw is that it's noted as lasting about 12 minutes. But the Proms concerts stay online for a bit too, so one could.
Thanks for the heads up. I didn't know that.
Final question. I'm just, we're naturally curious about the extent of his holdings and what he. So there's some connection between Bernstein and Indiana University also. Did he make some bequest to them as well?
What happened was, one of the things, we don't take everything that's offered to us. And one of the things we tend not to take is what we call realia, often three-dimensional objects, primarily because they're difficult to deal with. They're often hard to serve to researchers, and they rarely have real research value. They're sort of pretty and interesting, but if a scholar's coming, and they took his studio and rebuilt it, so his desk, his piano, all the tchotchkes on the walls, that kind of thing. So that's what's at Indiana. Yes?
It's on. Yeah, go for it.
Clarification and then question. Did you say the letter that The letter that he was writing to Felicia, when he talked about you are homosexual, he's talking about
No,
himself.
this is a letter from Felicia to him.
Oh, okay.
No,
Gotcha,
that's,
gotcha.
no, she's telling,
Okay, I was confused.
so she knows, and she's
She
saying, you
knows.
know, I understand, and this is what I think we need
This is
to
what-
do. It was, I know it's been mentioned before, but again, this huge expanded Bernstein website, it has all of the letters between Lenny and Felicia online.
That was my second
Yeah.
question is, how much, Nick commented that one of the letters we were looking at was not digitized. How much is still not digitized, and is there a reason? Is it content, or it just hasn't gotten done yet?
It's, how do I answer that? A huge amount is not digitized. There's about somewhere, I think, between 15 and 17,000 personal letters. I believe we've probably digitized somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 of those. One of the it's almost never had to do with subject. It has to do largely with rights. And it's, you know, letters within the family, you can deal with the family. Most of the letters in the collection are letters that people wrote to Bernstein. And for us to try and track down every author of a letter or their estate and try and get permission from them is beyond what we can do. Yes, Sue has a comment back there.
I just wanted to say that also it's a matter of resources. What we tried to do when we expanded the Bernstein website this time was to pad out and reveal much more of what of his life. But we'll never probably, unless somebody comes in and gives us the money to do it, we will never digitize everything, even if we had the rights. Because if we did that, we couldn't spend any money, any resources digitizing anyone else. And we really owe it to the other collections that have been entrusted to us to try and reveal what's there. And in truth, part of the beauty of all of this is having people come and discover things for themselves. And so we're leaving that as the mystery.
I should add that that's Susan Vita, who is the chief of the music division, who.
That's why I'm worried with resources.
Yeah, and none of this week, nothing would have happened without her blessing and approval, and so thank you, Sue. In terms of the website, though, what I got to, I don't know if I have a title associated with it. You know, I didn't do most of the legwork, but I got to work a lot on the planning of it. And we came up with about 50 topics that we thought were of most interest likely to sort of a broad public, and put as much online as we could related to those things. In some cases, it's like Comden and Green, so we put all the Comden and Green correspondence online and we could get in touch with them and their estates. We put much of the West Side Story material online, except for the Sondheim stuff because he's less comfortable with it. Most of the family's correspondence, so you get sort of with Felicia, with his brother, with his sister, and with his parents, so you get all of that. So we decided it was better to go deeper in these selected areas than, you know, sort of pick out things across the board, but you wouldn't be able to get as much meat from it. So,
Hi,
Yes.
Yes. You were able to capture so much in letting us know and communicating. We've lost the art of writing. We've lost getting our thoughts and our ideas out on paper like that. I'm wondering about the complexity of this man who would go to the Middle East and was dealing with Judaism, and wondering what you saw in his themes of even depression, his own sensuality, sexuality. There was so much that he had to compartmentalize, as well as getting so much down with his creativity. Did you see ebbs and flow and themes as you were mentioning toward the end, and looking at his life story, his life meaning, and just life period?
I think the answer is yes. And the only thing one of the things about Lenny is I'm not sure he really did compartmentalize. I think everything was sort of constantly there. But one of the most fascinating things about Lenny is the more time I spend with his stuff, with the people who knew him and worked with him, and the more I sense that he really was everything. He was you can see how meticulous he is in some things, and when he edits his scores, just making sure every rest, every tie is there, and he's always editing and correcting and before anything gets published. And then you can tell how sloppy and lazy he is at other things, and some manuscripts have coffee stains or cigarette burns in them. You see how, he's this deeply passionate religious man, and yet, he wrote a mass, and he clearly struggles with what faith is. He's a family man, and it's a really amazingly tight family, and everything I've seen about how they related to each other, and yet he was gay. He is contradictions. That's almost everything he is a contradiction, and that's my sense of him. I will say I've had the experience a couple of times in my time at the library where I get to be the archivist for somebody's collection, and if it's a large collection and I spend a year or more on it, all of a sudden it's like I can feel their ghost kind of growing behind my shoulder and kind of looking over me, and it's unlike any other experience, but I certainly have that with Lenny. So,
just two quick things. One is, again, everything's on YouTube, so it's great to watch his series of TV shows that he did about music composing and all that.
mm-hmm.
Is there material in there where he talks about preparing for these shows? And the second question is just what is the general legacy you get from him?
Well, again, I think people don't realize the young people's concerts and all those things. He really wrote those scripts. And in the collection, it's yellow legal pads of him writing out those scripts word for word, editing them, doing multiple drafts. And in the case of the young people's concerts, the omnibus, the Thursday evening previews, and Ford Presents, we've put those all online, the scripts, not the actual videos of them. So yes, I think is the answer to your question. And in terms of Lenny being a polymath, I think as a teacher was as important as being a composer or a conductor. And his legacy there is probably incalculable. I'm pretty confident in saying at least two generations of musicians were affected by the young people's concerts, because not only were they shown on TV, when I went to high school, when you took music class, that's what you did. You went in and they showed on the projector the young people's, and that's how you learn music. And I've heard from so many people who ended up becoming composers or musicians or conductors that that's what made them want to do it. So I think we'll never know how much, but I think it's one of his primary legacies. Any other questions? Going. Thanks for coming. Take care.